Okay, before I get much further, I want to explain this is not going to be the life and times of Wilmer McLean kind of documentary, mainly because there's not much on him. Books have the same sentence and a half about him, and the internet, as awesome as it is, doesn't know much about him. But don't worry, because there'll be plenty of Wilmer McLean knowledge in here to fill your historian up. The American Civil War was the bloodiest battle in American history. It all started when President Lincoln won the 1860 election. This prompted South Carolina to secede from the Union, afraid that Lincoln would steal away their slaves. It was followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These rebel states all came together to form the Confederacy. But the Confederacy didn't start its war with the Union until the following year with its first battle. The Battle of Well, I guess they did have Fort Sumter first, but that battle only had one casualty, a Confederate mule. I guess it did bring in some other states into the Confederacy, and it did bring in their most important state, Virginia. A lot of people expected the war to be over quickly. So merchants decided to make a few bucks off of the hopefully quick war. One Virginia merchant decided to rent his house out to Confederate troops to use as a hospital and a base, while speculating on things like sugar. That Virginia merchant, who also happened to be a farmer, was none other than Wilmer McLean. Being a former Virginia militia member, Wilmer was happy to allow the Confederacy to use his house. Then the First Battle of Bull Run hit. It was the first casualties in the war. Well, besides the mule thing. And with those first casualties came the first cannon shot that went straight for Wilmer's house. And he was okay with it. P.G.T. Beauregard later wrote about it in his diary. A comical effect of this artillery fight was the destruction of the dinner of myself and staff by a Federal shell that fell into the fireplace of my headquarters at the McLean house. A year later, the second Battle of Bull Run hit. This time, Wilmer was not okay with it. He decided that the risks of living so close to the war outweighed the rewards. So, Wilmer packed up his bags and moved away with his now pregnant wife, Virginia. He moved about 149 miles from Manassas, Virginia to Appomattox, Virginia. So much for getting away from the war. Now, flash forward ahead like 2 years, after all the famous speeches, after all the bloody battles, you found yourself at pretty much the end of the war. At the end of the war, the Confederacy wasn't doing so hot. They had lost over 1 million troops and were still losing more. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee decided enough was enough. He decided he could not risk more lives of Confederate troops. He had to sign a peace treaty. But where would he sign this peace treaty? I mean, this was the bloodiest war in American history. He couldn't just sign it at someone's house. But he did. Because on that day, Charles Marshall, General Lee's aide, came to a nearby house to ask the owner for a place they could meet. The owner was Wilmer McLean. Wilmer originally showed them a barn, but Charles insisted that it be done in his house. Reluctantly, Wilmer let them in. Robert E. Lee showed up at 1 o'clock in a crisp uniform. Ulysses Grant showed up in a muddy uniform. They chatted amongst themselves for about 25 minutes. Then, they decided to end the war. And that is the story of Wilmer McLean. As the saying goes, the war started in his kitchen and ended in his parlor. And that's really it. Nothing really happened to Wilmer after the Civil War. I mean, he did sell his house to a few people, but other than that, not much. He did have 5 kids, 4 daughters and 1 son. And he did die on July 5th, 1882. Most importantly, he was part of one of the biggest flukes of all time.